George Michael The Red Line will be broadcast for the first time on BBC Radio 2, split across two 60-minute programs on Wednesday 1 and Wednesday 8 November at 10 p.m. George gives Kirsty a frank first-hand account of the incredible success and devastating loss he faced across both his life and career. Just before Christmas 2016, Kirsty was asked to interview George for a film he was producing about his life and career. The intention was to use elements of their discussion as part of the soundtrack. The film would become Freedom, his final work. The interview took place at George's home, with Kirsty intending to cover only few specific areas. The conversation ran on for over 2 hours and subsequently led to a frank and informal discussion about George's life and career. Although it had never been the intention to broadcast their conversation in its entirety, following George's untimely death only a few weeks later, it began to feel like something that should happen. In fact, as they parted, George said to Kirsty, "You should turn this into a radio program." George Michael The Red Line is his final interview, told in almost all its entirety with many of the personal asides left as they were. Louis Carney, head of Radio 2, says the Radio 2 listeners continue to love and remember George Michael and his music, and I'm glad that they will be able to hear his final, very special interview on the station. Highlights from the programs include Program 1, George remembering the beginning of his career and teaming up with his school friend, Andrew Ridgeley, to form Wham! What a wonderful joyride for two 18-year-olds, what an amazing adventure. Wham! Itself was an absolute joy. It was joyous as it sounded, you know. How his decision to pursue a solo career almost felt predestined for him. There's always been this red line, I see it like a red line, which goes through everything. Like a staircase to whatever you're about to do next. And I could feel that at the final concert. I already had one foot in my solo career during Wham! The Final. On putting music before his personal life, I had a feeling that I couldn't have both. I felt that I couldn't come out and live a full gay life and still have my devotion to what I did. Becoming wary of using his appearance to promote his music, the real crux of what happened between Faith and Listen Without Prejudice. The young man, who was adored by millions but couldn't work out why, said, "If I take away the image, if I take away this face, I'll see whether they still love me." Meeting Anselmo and entering into his first long-term relationship, I was happier than I'd ever been in my entire life. Fame, money, everything else just kind of paled by comparison to finally, at 27 years old, waking up in bed with someone who loves you. How he felt after losing his court case against Sony Music. "I feel I took 3 years out of my career. I spent $7 million and I got nothing for artists. Nothing. And then 10 years later it's a different generation that never looks at what they're doing to their fellow man, you know. Let alone fellow artists." Program 2, his performance of Somebody to Love, which was dedicated to his partner Anselmo, who had at that point been diagnosed with HIV, at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert in 1992. "I went for 5 days to rehearse. Everyone else went for an afternoon. I went for 5 days because it had to be perfect. And I think it's probably my most famous performance. It's not an accident that the performance probably most well-known in my career was sung to my lover who was dying." Going back to the studio after Anselmo's death and making his third solo studio album, Older is my greatest moment, in my opinion. I don't ever want to be that inspired again. I wrote Older within about, I suppose, 810 months. I think I wrote the best, most healing piece of music that I've ever written in my life with that album. His optimism towards the future of his recording career, even when I've lost control, even when I've really hit rock bottom, I believe that the red line is still there. And that this period of downtime will result in something spectacular. George Michael The Red Line will be broadcast for the first time on BBC Radio 2 on Wednesday 1 and Wednesday 8 November at 10 p.m. The program was produced by TBI Media, and executive produced by David Austin. Shish pictured George Michael and Kirsty Young in 2007.